because any damn thing I had to do is to speak with Cole Collins. So we're going to talk about the B-25. I had the privilege of flying 43 missions in the Strafer version of it in the Pacific with the outstanding B-25 organization known as the Apaches, 345th Bomb Group. Their record led all B-25 units in World War II, combat records that is, and mainly because they were strafers. First of all, of course, the B-25 during World War II, they made 10,000 of them. Came out in about 1939, and it was just a damn good airplane right from the beginning. Everybody enjoyed flying it, especially if you had a good, strong left arm. You had no way that you had hydraulics on the control surfaces at all, of course. So you needed to be young and strong to fly that airplane. And also, if you see me do this every once in a while, no one has ever flown a B-25. It's not a little bit deaf. Because the engines have individual exhaust stacks on each one of the cylinders. And in the Pacific, with 850s in the nose, we were flying with those, you get cordite into the cockpit, so you had to get it out of there, otherwise at 50 feet off the deck on a run, your cockpit was full of cordite smoke from the 850s in the nose, so you open the side windows on there to suck that stuff out of there, and that got you a little bit closer to being deaf with those engines out there. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about the Strafer version. A gentleman by the name of Paul Pappy Gunn, who started out as an enlisted pilot in the Navy. Came out of the Navy, I'm not sure whether he did 20 years before he left, or just left the Navy after flying for them. He had been an A&E and then a pilot with the Navy, and he bought a couple of Cessna twin-engine aircraft and took them to the Philippines, and he's the guy who started the Philippine Airlines with two 7 or 8 passenger Cessnas. When the war came along, when the Japanese hit the Philippines, he was pressed into service to fly a lot of VIPs out of the Philippines. He knew all the little airfields. Nobody knew who was on Mindanao and all those areas over there better than he did. He ended up down to one airplane and using the other one for parts. And he had his own wife and 3 children in Manila. And he was going to take them out on the next run when he found out that they were incarcerated by the Japanese at Connecticut prison. So his family spent the entire war in Connecticut prison while he was flying other people out. The Army approached him and offered him a direct commission of captain. And he was in his 40s then. And he accepted it. They recognized the fact that nobody knew the Philippines better than he did, at least from a flying standpoint. And so he was brought to Australia, and he became a specialist, if you want to call it, or a guy that he worked with General Kenny, who was the #1 airman on General MacArthur's staff. And he would do all kinds of things for General Kenny. And one of the things he did was to prove that the best use of the B-25 was as a strafer. He started off with took the glass nose off and put 450s in it, went out and flew a few missions with it that way. And by the time he got through, there were 1850s on that B-25. No other bomber has ever had that many 50 caliber guns on it. From the B-29 on down, the B-25 had the most guns. At one time, with 3,000 pounds of bombs and 1850s, for her size, people would say that she had more armament than a light cruiser. be a trooper. But we ended up with 850s in the nose, 2 package guns on either side. So the pilot fired 12 50s forward, and I can tell you, you did a hell of a lot of damage with 12 50s. You could cut things to pieces. Anyway, Tommy Gunn flew about 20 missions to prove that this was the best use of it. We got some great strike photos. And General Kenny then wired back to the States that he wanted all the rest of the 25s produced by North America to be in that mode. Well, the first thing that happens, he comes back, he gets an answer back. The engineers back in the States said, no, the airplane won't get off the ground with all those 850s. And he said, no, they certainly will. Certainly. Well, it ended up with Kenny and Tommy Gunn having to go back to the States. And they had a meeting in General Hap Arnold's office with the engineers. And it wasn't until General Kenny dumped the briefcase full of strike photos on the table and said, don't tell me the thing won't fly. And about that time, Hap Arnold threw the engineers out, said, start building. And that's the story of how the B-25 became the Strafer. Why they didn't rename it an A-25, because now it was an attack airplane instead of a bomber. But we carried about 3,000 pounds of bombs on top of the guns that we had. And later, very late in the game, they started hanging 5-inch high-velocity rockets, 4 under each wing. So that really became a flying gun platform for sure. And we could see about 250 miles an hour over the target. I had, this is a picture of my crew here. I picked them up in combat crew training. I was fortunate in that I was in the first experimental B-25 advanced flying school that the Air Force had at Turner Air Force Base. Up to that time, you had nothing but trainers through your primary, basic, and advanced flight training. But they decided to take the B-25 and take the armament off of it, make a TB on it, a training bomber, and see whether it would work all right. And I was lucky enough to be in the first B-25 class in advance, so that when I went to combat crew training, I went right into continued on in the B-25 combat crew training. But since I already had that B-25 training, I went right in as a combat crew commander and picked up the rest of my crew. We were assigned to the Pacific upon graduation, and they sent us out to Fairfield City, California, down Travis Air Force Base. And those of us who had the highest time would get to fly a brand new B-25 in the Pacific. Those that had the lesser amount of time were ferried over by transport aircraft. But I sat there for about 7 days and we finally delivered a brand new 25 from North America. And we test hopped it that afternoon, an hour and a half, 2 hours. And what they had done was put a bladder type of fuel tank in the bomb bay, 250 gallons. Because we had a 10.5-hour flight to Hawaii, and we needed the extra fuel. And we took off just after dawn, and as we're leaving the Oakland, San Francisco area, one of my guys said to me, "Sir," he said, "why don't we fly under the Golden Gate Bridge on the way out?" And before I could answer, one of the other guys said, "Yeah, what the hell can they do? Send us to combat?" So we flew under the Golden Gate Bridge. And I hope there's nobody here from the FAA. And we island hopped from Hawaii on to Biak, where they took the airplane away from me, and they said they had to do in-theater changes to it. And my crew and I were sent up to Natsat, New Guinea, which is the Markham Valley of New Guinea. And they told me that we're going to get in-theater practice there. And we would be running missions on the WWII in that area. It was sort of cleanup missions, because the Japanese were still there. And we would probably be anywhere 6 to 8 months, by weeks, excuse me, in the training mode. We were there enough time, we flew 4 missions. And I don't think we were there 3 weeks. And the colonel commanding it called me in and said, "You're going to get the rest of your training with the 345th Bomb Group. They've lost 8 airplanes this week." And they said they need crews. So we were sent back to BAC beginning, and there was a B-25 there. Come in from the new organization I was going to join. And they took us up to Tacloban in the Philippines. That's in Lady Bay area. But en route, we had to land in the Palau group of islands. That was the stepping stone to get to to get the Philippines from BAC. And it was manned by the Marines. The Marines lost about 5,000 people. Taking that Palau group, it's one of their bigger battles. And anyway, when we landed there, we saw that all the officers in our group would be staying in points with us, and all of our enlisted guys would go into tents down near the swamp somewhere. So I made them all second lieutenants and passed them off as replacement pilots and navigators. And they all slept in their closets with us. And we got away with that. Anyway, arriving in the Philippines, I was assigned to the 500 squadron. There were 4 squadrons, 498, 499, 500, 501st. The 500th was called the Bloody 500. It had more losses than the other 3 squadrons. And I'd also add they had the best combat record of the 4 squadrons. It goes hand in hand. If your neck is stuck out that far, you're losing a lot. You're going to lose a lot, along with the record. And you were not, even if you're a combat group commander bringing through it, you weren't allowed to fly with your crew until they put you in the right seat, co-pilot seat, one of the older guys in the squadron. And you usually flew about 5 missions as a co-pilot. Well, they sort of indoctrinated you into their way of flying and gave you a feel for what it was like. I flew 3 missions, and the operations officer says, "I'm going to turn you loose with your crew." And he stood about this tall, and he's looking up at me in a very quiet voice. He said, "Well, I want to tell you something right up front. If I catch your butt about 50 feet over a target, I'm going to ground it." And he said, "You're going to find out the lower you fly that bird, the better chance you got to go home someday." And he was absolutely right. On our shipping missions, I can remember the radio altimeter we had in there. We'd be counting the weight back. And that's down pretty low. We brought a lot of salt home on the bottom of the airplane as well. It was a different kind of flying. You got down there where it was personal. I can remember when we were running down an airfield, seeing the tops of trees disappear back at where they were trying to get down to our level to hit us. And the trees were everywhere, and the tops of the trees were disappearing. So the lower we flew, the better it was. And we got really used to it. 250 miles an hour and about 40, 50 feet off the deck, it's real personal. And but it was a way of finding your way home. That begun. We give him credit for all of that. Give you an idea about how some of the missions were flown. I think we were probably at the very beginning of the parafragmentation bombs, we flew so low that we had to have something to slow the bomb down, to let us get out of the way, otherwise we lose the rear end of the airplane, to allow that bomb to go behind us. And so we did a lot of parafrag bombing, we did napalming. I think it's interesting to tell you how we used to approach our shipping. No matter how hard you tried to go either stern to bow or vice versa, by the time you got set up to hit a ship, they were always broadside. And of course they had all your guns to bear on you that way. We would try to fly very low, try to get below the suppression of their guns. And of course what they would do is shoot into the water ahead of us. If you hit a big cloud, a big bunch of water coming in, it was like hitting a stone ball anyway. But we would fly in pairs. We weren't prepared. The first guy, the leader, would go in fishtailing and clearing the decks with those 50s, keeping the Navy guys away from their guns, or keep them down, while the wingman, he concentrated on getting his bombs on the target, and then we would switch positions, and he would become the leader to do the spraying, and the other guy would drop his bombs on the next gun or on their ship. It worked pretty well. Interdiction missions, we had, there were Butenol rubber plants that were making tires and all kinds of rubber stuff. And we were hitting those as targets. We were hitting communication centers, railroads, airfields. We worked with the ground troops and spraying for them, as the Marines did before their own. We did it for the Army. And it was an interesting way to fly, believe me. The most famous of all of A-25s is Tondoleo. That's Tondoleo. And let me tell you about that airplane. It and two wingmen were hitting a target in New Guinea, and they were jumped by 40 Japanese fighters. The two wingmen were shot down. Tondoleo lost her right engine. Pilot took her down to right on top of the ocean. And for 70 minutes, they fought off 40 Japanese fighters. The upper turret gunner became an ace in that hour or so. He shot 5 of them down with the upper turret. And then 2 more, in their zeal to get to the 25, misjudged their height and went into the ocean. So the airplane was credited with 7 kills on the way home, and she made it home. Tondoleo, B-25 marked with this marking, is still flying today. The Collins Foundation in Massachusetts flies around the country with a B-17, a B-24, a B-25, and a Mustang. And you can buy rides on it. And the B-25 is coming the way. Not the original aircraft, obviously, but it's in honor of its record. I'd like to tell you another story of this ditching. The pilot is seen here getting out of the airplane. This is off the Philippines. And he's got his radio operator here and bringing him to the life raft. And he at the time did not know this, but his upper turret operator never got out of the airplane. He went down with the airplane. This was the wingman, Seabiscuit, flew for 3 hours and 15 minutes protecting them because they weren't too far offshore. And the Japanese were coming out to pick up the crew, and they knew that would be the end of the crew if they got them. So he drove off all the boats and airplane in May with his own crew was lost on a raid on Hong Kong Harbor. And the pilot of this one was leading that gentleman on Hong Kong. He had a freighter full of ammunition that blew up into this fellow's airplane. And that's how he was lost. He was blown out of the air by the ammunition blow of a ship in the harbor of Hong Kong. That airplane's been located, and a very wealthy gentleman in Hong Kong is having a monument built on the site where that airplane went in. The other thing about that airplane was the whole crew, the Chinese people took the crew and buried them in their cemetery, knowing that if the Japanese got them, they would dismember them. So they were all, of course, the Americans came in later and they were heard the story, and all of those bodies have been returned to the States. But it's an interesting play. This one in front of me is a painting that was done by a radio operator in this airplane, and this is mine. I had a right rudder shot out coming off a mission, and he did that from memory. You could push the right rudder down and you had to pull it back with your toe. This wasn't wanting. But I could make all the left-hand turns I needed to. And so we came home making left-hand turns. The other thing about the B-25, which is interesting, fuel was a big problem. And we were flying these long-range missions. And I'll tell you what, it wasn't with the idea of coming back and having 15 minutes loiter time to land with. It was calculating it to get you home. And we had a navigator bombardier on the original B-25s who did both. But when we went to the 850s and the nose, the navigator became just that, a navigator. But his primary job when on these long overall water flights that we made was to calculate our fuel and tap you on the shoulder and say you got 7 minutes all out over the target and still have enough fuel to get home with. And he would keep track of that and touch you on the shoulder and he said, we gotta get out of here, we're gonna run out of fuel. And he was just talking about making it home. And of course our biggest worry was if we got one engine shot out or we lost it for any reason, it took more fuel to keep the airplane airborne on one engine than it did with 2 engines running leaned out with fuel. So you knew you weren't going to make it home on those long missions. And then the navigator would calculate about where you were going to hit the ocean, about where you go down, and the radio operator would start to get on the radio and see who he could connect with, whether a submarine in the area or a PBY that was out on patrol, or we had B-17s with a boat underneath it, see who to contact. And luckily he would be able to get to set it down somewhere where they could pick them up without being in a water too low. We had more ships that went down that we lost the crews, even when they were seen to get out and into river rafts, than we recovered. They just disappeared. That was one of the things we were really concerned with. I remember saying to intelligence officer, I said, I understand that if Japanese get a hold of our crews, they'd be happy. He says, that's exactly right. And I said, well, what advice do you have? He says, don't go down and do that. He said, that's fine, thank you very much for that. But it was true. We did lose a lot of them. When we hit Clark Field, and the Philippines. It was with about 40 B-25s abreast, 4 or 5 waves of them. We went up, turned around, came back down again, and just about destroyed everything that they had on their ground on that. We lost one crew shot down there, and when it was found, when the crew was found, they were all beheaded. We didn't know if we ever would get our troops back, and we were very surprised that some that we never saw anybody ever come out of would end up somehow in a prisoner work camp in Raleigh. Our guys, all of our enlisted crew, carried officer rank with them in their pockets. And the idea of that was, if you were a major or higher, you had a halfway decent chance of being sent back to the rear for intelligence briefing and end up in a prisoner work camp. If you were not an officer of something, that's the reason why you get decapitated. They wouldn't want to bother you if you weren't anybody. So the guys carried rank with them in case they went down. Okay. But it all wasn't just fighting all the time. We had some fun, some games. We had what we call prayer meetings. If we were standing down from combat the next day, either for maintenance or whatever the reason, whether that would be a good night to party. And we didn't see much in the way of liquor over there other than a 6-pack of beer a week. And I think the stuff that we got was called Acme out of San Francisco, and it was about this color, green. And you would be happy to swap 6-pack for 1 can of anything else, I can remember. But the flight surgeon had 120 proof ground form in bourbon, and if you were on a particularly tough mission, he would give you a shot of that when you were through with your intelligence briefing. And fortunately for me, 3 of my crew members didn't drink. And so my co-pilot and I got the access. And the nice thing about that was that if you had a few of those, you didn't care whether you were ate or not. And the food wasn't that jazzy anyway. Then what we do at these prayer meetings is sing a lot. Some songs I can't even repeat to you. But once in a while, we would be able to get a hold of some Filipino liquor. And what we do is bring home a sampling of it before we bought it, and had our flight surgeon check it out to make sure it would not either blind us or kill us. And we'd go to somebody's tent for the prayer meeting, as we call it, and with canteen cups, and you'd pour this rotten gut in there. What it was made out of, I have no idea, probably cactus, cactus juice, or whatever it was. And put in dry lemon powder, and then go out to a Lister bag, it's one of the rubber bags, with purified water with all kinds of chemicals in it, which didn't taste great to begin with. You add that to it, mix it up, and then you do a lot of singing. When you couldn't sing anymore, they send you back to your tent. And I can tell you something, the following morning, you talk about hungover, you were banging your head on the center pole of the tent to get the pain on the outside. But we had some other, I thought, Yankee ingenuity things. The showers were built with P-38 belly tanks, or drop tanks. And they would open up the tops and fill them with water, or if it was raining, they would get filled that way. And we'd take a number 10 can from the mess halls, punch holes in the bottom, that was a shower head. And you would get in there and you were authorized a 3-second get wet, soap up in maybe 5 or 7 seconds, or wash over and out. And the nice thing about it was you did this shower in the early evening so that it was nice warm water, because the water was under the sun all day long. It warmed up and it made a nice long shower for you. They had the guys' ingenuity. They built a laundry machine, which was like a big barrel, with paddles inside, and they had a bicycle, seat, chain, hookup, and the guys would take turns riding that to make the paddles go back and forth. Everybody threw their clothes in there, and that's why you got nice works. I can remember we had a 10-hole outhouse at one place that we're at, and it was screened in around the sides, and had a roof on it, and a screen door. And what usually happened with that was about once a week, somebody was assigned the job of going up there and pouring flammable liquid down the holes and burning it off, and then throwing lye in there. Well, this guy went up there one day and he got his liquid in and forgot his matches. Went back to his tent to get matches to drop them in there. And meanwhile, this big burly sergeant with sawed-off shorts, and that's all he was wearing, socks and shoes, and smoking a stogie with a 6-month-old newspaper. He goes in there and he's sitting on one hole and he's flicking ashes down the other one. And we heard boom! And we looked out there and that outhouse was about a foot off the ground. And before it came crashing down, off comes the screen door, hinges and all. Bang! And he's coming out, he's still pulling his britches up, hadn't lost the paper or cigar, he still had that. And he was running down the hill with big guys. And when we asked him afterwards, when we talked to him after, he said he thought that the Japs had bombed the outhouse. Oh, that was a great day. Let me say a little something about the guys who kept us airborne. I don't think I can say enough about it. The things they did to an airplane so it would be ready for a mission the next day was absolutely phenomenal. Even if they didn't have time to patch the holes up from yesterday, they would take cans here again from the mess halls, flatten them out, and put them as coverage for the holes until they had time to do a proper job on them, just to get you airborne. They worked hours that you just can't believe, but they would give us everything was max effort, and they were fantastic. And while I'm on that subject, I don't think I know anybody who's ever been in the military that doesn't say they have two families. Their own family and their military family. And sometimes it's hard not to say that they're equal as far as your love for both of them. I am privileged at the moment to be the president of my 500th Bomb Squadron Association, and I so look forward to seeing those guys once a year when we review them. And while I'm on that subject, Vern Sawyer, sitting right here, is one of our pilots that flew with me. Get up. We're leaving you at about 1,500 a day. We're two people. And I always like to think we're fading away rather than leaving. And what we've done in my squadron, I wish the devil every other military organization had done. It was not my idea, it was somebody else's, but it's a great one. What we have done, I have 360 members in my squadron. 75% of them are second, third, and fourth generation we've made honorary members. And they're going to carry on this association for years to come. I think we just had a fourth generation just signed up. And the marvelous thing is to have our families as part of this, so that when we old-timers are all gone, the knowledge that they're going to continue things and honor the organization means a lot to us. Now, I'd like to field any questions you might have.
You got done early.
A little early? Want some more stories? Well, you
Explain about the patches on your uniform. Can you tell me about the patches on your uniform?
patches, okay. Well, first, this is the 345th Bomb Group. This is the Apaches. And the great thing about this was that we used to hear Tokyo Rose say that pointed out that you see those airplanes with the Indian heads on the tail. The United States has released Indians from the reservation and taught them how to fly. And they're nothing but savages. So we knew we were heading to them. The other thing I like about this is the fact that we couldn't go into a small pub or village in the Philippines where there were ground troops that hadn't seen this, and it was hard for us to buy a drink. They would come over and tell us how that we had flown over their lines and had wiped out the Japanese in front of them, and how appreciative they were of that. This is my 500 squadron, called Rough Raiders. And almost all of our airplanes had horses' names, as you can see right here with Seabiscuit. These two are my after World War II formations. This is the 31st Fighter Wing, Return with Honor, which is still in being. It's a